Dear learners, welcome back to WSE True Stories, where learning English becomes an unforgettable adventure. Today, we invite you into the life of one of history's most ambitious and extraordinary leaders, Julius Caesar, the man who changed Rome forever. This is not just the story of a general who conquered lands. It is the journey of a man who rose from political chaos and personal danger to reshape the destiny of the Roman world. It is a tale of courage, brilliance, betrayal, and legacy. And as you follow Caesar's path, you will not only improve your English listening and understanding, but also find yourself inspired by the determination and resilience of a leader who never gave up on his vision. Julius Caesar's story is one of the most powerful lessons in ambition and transformation. He faced challenges that could have destroyed him, yet he turned them into opportunities to rise higher. His victories and struggles still speak to us today, reminding us of the cost of power and the meaning of legacy. If you'd like to support our work, you are welcome to like, comment, share, or join us. Your support means a lot and helps us keep creating meaningful content for you. So, get ready for one of the most thrilling, dramatic, and inspirational journeys in history. Let us begin the story of Julius Caesar, the ambitious general who changed Rome forever. Julius Caesar was born in the year 100 BCE, into a Rome that was both powerful and fragile. The Roman Republic had conquered vast territories, stretching across the Mediterranean, but inside the city, politics was unstable, and corruption spread like a disease. Senators fought for influence, generals competed for glory, and the common people suffered in the struggles of the elite. It was a world full of opportunities, but also dangers that could destroy any ambitious soul. Caesar came from the Julian family, one of the ancient patrician families of Rome. They claimed to be descendants of Aeneas, the legendary hero of Troy, and through him, linked to the goddess Venus. This gave Caesar a sense of divine heritage, a belief that his life carried a special destiny. Yet, despite this noble background, his family was not rich. His father held only moderate political power, and his mother, Aurelia, was known for her strength and wisdom, shaping Caesar's early education. In his childhood, Caesar witnessed Rome torn by rivalries. Powerful generals like Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla battled for control. Civil war left the streets filled with fear and uncertainty. Caesar, even as a boy, absorbed these lessons, that Rome was not just about laws and traditions, but also about power, loyalty, and survival. When Caesar was 16, his father died suddenly, leaving him as the head of the family. At an age when most youths were still under guidance, Caesar had to take responsibility for his household. Soon after, Rome's dictator, Sulla, rose to power. Sulla saw Caesar as a threat because of his ties to Marius, who was his uncle by marriage. Caesar was ordered to divorce his young wife, Cornelia. He refused, showing a courage far beyond his years. For this defiance, his life was in danger. Soldiers hunted him, and he had to flee Rome, hiding from Sulla's wrath. This was the beginning of a life shaped by challenge. Instead of breaking under pressure, Caesar learned to survive through wit and resilience. He joined the army, where he began to earn respect for his bravery in battle. From a young man pursued by death, he started to transform into a soldier, a thinker, and a leader in the making. At this moment, no one in Rome could have predicted that this hunted youth, forced into exile, would one day return to the city not as a fugitive, but as a conqueror who would leave an everlasting mark on history. The first great challenge of Caesar's life began not on the battlefield, but in the shadow of political violence. After refusing to obey Sulla's command to divorce Cornelia, Caesar lived as a marked man. For months, he wandered, moving from one safe place to another, always in fear of betrayal. The young Caesar learned early that power often spoke louder than justice. Yet, instead of surrendering, he turned this crisis into a test of will. During his time in exile, he found refuge in the army. As a soldier, he showed remarkable courage and determination. In one battle, he fought so fiercely that he was awarded the civic crown, one of Rome's highest military honors. It was not just a decoration, it was a symbol that Caesar, though young, was destined for greatness. The experience of war shaped him deeply. He saw how discipline, strategy, and boldness could achieve what politics often could not. After Sulla's death, Caesar returned to Rome. But he returned to a city that was still unstable. Political factions divided the Senate, corruption poisoned the courts, and violence often filled the streets. To survive, Caesar needed more than courage, he needed influence. He began to study the art of public speaking, training his voice, his gestures, and his presence until he became one of the most powerful orators of his generation. His speeches combined intelligence with emotion, reason with passion. The people admired him, the Senate noticed him, and slowly his reputation grew. But the path forward was not smooth. Caesar had no great fortune to buy support, and in Rome, wealth was often the key to power. He borrowed heavily, building relationships with powerful men and relying on promises of future success. Many saw him as reckless, but Caesar believed in his destiny and was willing to risk everything to achieve it. Then came a dramatic episode that revealed not only his courage but also his confidence in leadership. On a voyage across the Mediterranean, Caesar was kidnapped by pirates. Most men would have trembled, but not Caesar. He treated his captors not as masters, but as subordinates. He joked with them, demanded that they raise his ransom because he believed he was worth more, and even warned them that once freed, he would return to punish them. The pirates laughed, but Caesar kept his word. After his release, he gathered ships, hunted down the pirates, and had them executed. This bold act spread his fame across Rome. Here was a man who did not bend to fear, a man who turned humiliation into triumph. Still, the deeper problem remained, Rome itself. The Republic was crumbling under inequality, greed, and endless rivalry. The Senate could not control the growing power of generals, and the poor demanded justice. Caesar saw this with clear eyes. He knew that Rome needed change, and he began to dream of himself as the one who could bring it. Yet, ambition was dangerous. Many who reached too high in Rome fell quickly, struck down by rivals. Caesar now stood at the edge of a new chapter. He had survived Sulla, won honor in war, mastered oratory, and proved his boldness against pirates. But these were only the first steps. The real test lay ahead, how to rise in Rome without being destroyed by it. Caesar's struggle to rise in Roman politics was like walking a tightrope over fire. Every step forward brought him closer to power, but also closer to danger. He had ambition burning within him, but he needed to climb carefully, earning allies, victories, and trust without giving his enemies a chance to destroy him. He began with small but meaningful offices. First, he served as a military tribune, gaining experience and respect from soldiers. Then he became quaestor, responsible for financial duties in Spain. These positions were not glamorous, but they taught him how Rome worked from the inside. More importantly, they allowed him to strengthen his connections with powerful families and generals. Caesar was not just fighting for survival anymore, he was learning to navigate the labyrinth of Roman politics. One of his greatest strengths was his ability to connect with ordinary people. Unlike many aristocrats, Caesar walked among the crowds, listened to their complaints, and spoke with warmth and clarity. He offered games, entertainment, and public works, all funded by money he borrowed. Debt piled higher and higher, but Caesar understood that popularity was more valuable than gold. If I must be in debt to win Rome, he thought, then let me owe the world, so long as the people owe me their hearts. But Rome was not a place where charm alone could secure safety. His rivals were always watching. Caesar knew he needed protection, so he sought alliances. He drew closer to men like Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, and Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. With them, Caesar began to form a foundation for what would later be known as the First Triumvirate, a partnership that would shake the Republic to its core. Before that alliance was complete, Caesar faced another trial in Spain. As governor, he proved himself not just as a politician, but as a commander. His legions crushed rebellious tribes, and his leadership was decisive. Yet it was not the victories alone that mattered. It was what he felt standing among his soldiers, seeing their loyalty, their discipline, their willingness to follow him anywhere. In their eyes, he was not just a politician, he was a leader of men. This experience gave him confidence that he could rise even higher, not only in Rome but across the world. However, his return to Rome after Spain brought both opportunity and challenge. To run for consul, the highest office in the Republic, he needed to balance enemies and allies with careful skill. He played the game of politics with brilliance, promising support to the people while reassuring the Senate that he respected tradition. Yet inside him burned a deeper fire. He wanted more than just the consulship. He wanted to change Rome forever. It was in these years that Caesar began to reveal his extraordinary resilience. Every obstacle, whether debt, rivalries, or political traps, seemed to push him further instead of pulling him down. He learned to turn enemies into stepping stones and setbacks into preparation. Like a river carving its path through stone, Caesar advanced steadily, shaping his destiny. And still, the shadow of danger hung over him. Rome was a place where alliances turned into betrayals overnight, where today's friend could be tomorrow's assassin. Caesar could feel the tension building. He had risen high enough to be seen as a threat, but not yet high enough to be untouchable. The struggle of his first journey was coming to an end. Ahead lay the turning point that would change not only Caesar's life, but the fate of Rome itself. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation, where ambition, power, and destiny would collide. The year was 60 BCE, and Julius Caesar stood at a crossroads. He had climbed far, winning victories in Spain, mastering the art of persuasion in Rome, and building popularity among the people. But popularity alone could not protect him. The Senate, dominated by the conservative elite, still distrusted him. They saw in him a dangerous mix: ambition, charisma, and vision. He could not advance without greater power, and greater power could not be gained without allies. It was here that Caesar made the decision that would change his life and the history of Rome. He reached out to two men who were very different from each other, yet equally powerful. The first was Pompey the Great, the celebrated general whose victories had expanded Rome's empire and brought him unmatched military prestige. The second was Crassus, the wealthiest man in the Republic, whose fortune could buy almost anything, or anyone. These three men, Caesar the ambitious politician, Pompey the soldier, and Crassus the banker, formed a secret alliance that became known as the First Triumvirate. Together, they could dominate Roman politics. With their support, Caesar was elected consul in 59 BCE. It was a triumph, but also the beginning of a storm. As consul, he passed laws that favored the poor, secured land for Pompey's veterans, and opened doors for Crassus's business interests. He used his office not for compromise but for bold reform. To the people, he was a hero. To the Senate, he was dangerous. Yet Caesar pressed forward, knowing that hesitation could mean ruin. At the end of his consulship, Caesar sought a new command. He was given the provinces of Gaul, a vast territory stretching into modern France and Belgium. To many, it seemed a distant, even undesirable post. But Caesar saw what others did not. Gaul was an opportunity. With its wealth, land, and tribes to be conquered, it was the stage on which he could prove himself not just as a politician, but as a conqueror. The Gallic Wars became the great turning point of his life. For nearly a decade, Caesar led legions through forests, rivers, and mountains, facing fierce tribes and powerful chieftains. The campaigns were brutal and exhausting, but Caesar's genius in strategy and his ability to inspire loyalty made victory after victory possible. His commentaries on the Gallic War, written in clear and direct Latin, not only recorded these battles but also served as propaganda. Every Roman could read of his triumphs, his courage, and his vision. One of the most dramatic moments came in 52 BCE, when a united Gallic army under the chieftain Vercingetorix rose against Rome. The rebellion was fierce, and for a time, even Caesar's position seemed desperate. But at the fortress of Alesia, Caesar demonstrated his brilliance. Outnumbered, he built double fortifications, one facing the enemy within, and another facing reinforcements outside. Surrounded himself, he surrounded others. When the final battle came, Caesar's legions held firm. Vercingetorix surrendered, and Gaul belonged to Rome. This victory was more than military. It gave Caesar unmatched wealth, the loyalty of hardened legions, and fame that outshone even Pompey. In the eyes of the people, he was Rome's greatest general. In the eyes of the Senate, he was becoming too powerful to control. The balance of power was shifting, and the fragile alliance of the triumvirate was beginning to crumble. Soon after, Crassus died in battle, and the bond between Caesar and Pompey broke apart. Once allies, they became rivals. Pompey aligned himself with the Senate, while Caesar remained the champion of the people and his soldiers. Rome was now divided, and the Republic trembled on the edge of civil war. Caesar's turning point was complete. From a politician dependent on alliances, he had become a general with an army at his back. He had crossed the threshold where no return was possible. The man who once hid from Sulla's soldiers was now the most powerful figure in the Roman world, standing at the edge of destiny. The year was 49 BCE. Julius Caesar stood with his legions at the banks of the Rubicon River, the small stream that marked the boundary between his province and Italy itself. Behind him lay Gaul, where he had built his glory. Ahead of him lay Rome, where his enemies waited. The Senate, now controlled by Pompey and the conservatives, had ordered him to give up his command, disband his army, and return as a private citizen. For Caesar, this was not just a command. It was a death sentence. Without his soldiers, he would be defenseless against the accusations of his enemies. His choice was simple, yet terrifying: surrender and be destroyed, or march on Rome and plunge the Republic into civil war. He looked at the river and hesitated. The decision weighed heavily. Crossing it meant breaking Roman law, declaring himself an enemy of the state. But not crossing meant losing everything he had fought for. With destiny pressing upon him, Caesar finally spoke the words that echoed through history: "The die is cast." He led his soldiers across the Rubicon. Rome would never be the same again. The civil war that followed was fierce and unforgiving. Caesar moved quickly, driving Pompey and his allies out of Italy. But Pompey was no ordinary rival. He still commanded vast forces and support from the Senate. The struggle spread across the Mediterranean. At Pharsalus in 48 BCE, the two greatest generals of their age finally clashed. Caesar's legions, though outnumbered, fought with unbreakable discipline. His strategy turned Pompey's strength into weakness. When the battle ended, Pompey's army was shattered, and Pompey himself fled, only to be murdered in Egypt. Caesar wept when he saw the head of his former ally and son-in-law. Even in victory, he knew the price of ambition was stained with betrayal and blood. Yet Rome was not at peace. Caesar pursued his enemies across the empire, from North Africa to Spain. Each victory strengthened his power, but each also deepened the fear of those who saw him as a threat to liberty. The Senate granted him the title of dictator, first for a year, then for 10 years, and finally for life. He had achieved supreme power, but at a terrible cost. The Republic was dying, and Caesar himself was becoming its symbol of change. In these years, Caesar revealed another side of his transformation. He no longer fought only for himself, but also for the vision of a reformed Rome. He passed laws to ease poverty, granted citizenship to many, and restructured the calendar into the system we still use today, the Julian calendar. His ambition had grown beyond personal glory. He dreamed of a Rome that was united, efficient, and strong. But with this dream came sacrifice. He had to sacrifice the old traditions, the Senate's authority, and the fragile balance that had once defined the Republic. For Caesar, the greatest sacrifice was perhaps personal. He had lived much of his life surrounded by danger, betrayal, and war. Trust became rare. Even among his friends and allies, whispers of jealousy and conspiracy grew louder. He must have known that his climb to the top had left him standing alone, admired by the masses, feared by the elite, but isolated in the shadow of power. The climax of Caesar's conflict was not just about armies or laws. It was about choice. He chose to cross the Rubicon when retreat was safer. He chose to forgive enemies when vengeance was expected. He chose to rule boldly when compromise might have preserved peace. Each choice carried sacrifice, sometimes of tradition, sometimes of trust, sometimes of lives. Yet these choices defined him as the man who dared to reshape the destiny of Rome. But destiny is never free. As Caesar stood at the height of power, crowned with victory, honored as dictator for life, the seeds of his downfall were already growing. For those who loved the Republic, his ambition was too great, his power too absolute. And soon, the greatest betrayal of all would strike at the very heart of his legacy. When Julius Caesar returned to Rome after his victories, he was no longer just a general. He was the master of the Roman world. The Senate, once proud and untouchable, bowed before him. The streets filled with cheering crowds, and celebrations echoed through the city. Triumph after triumph was awarded to him, grand parades where prisoners and treasures from his campaigns were displayed. To the people of Rome, Caesar was not only a leader, he was almost a legend made flesh. But Caesar's greatest achievements were not only on the battlefield. He carried a vision that stretched beyond war. He wanted to reform Rome itself, to rebuild it into a city worthy of its empire. He began with the calendar, which had long fallen into confusion. With the help of astronomers, he introduced the Julian calendar, giving the world a more accurate system of time that we still use today in its modern form. This was not just a technical change, it was a symbol that Caesar wanted to bring order to chaos. He also worked to reduce poverty and inequality. He passed laws that gave land to veterans and the poor. He lowered debts, created jobs through public works, and opened the Senate to people from across the provinces. For centuries, Rome had been ruled by a narrow elite, but Caesar believed that Rome's greatness should include all its people. These reforms earned him the love of the masses, but also the hatred of those who saw their privileges slipping away. As a military leader, Caesar's achievements were unmatched. His conquest of Gaul alone brought enormous wealth and secured Rome's borders. He had shown the world the power of Roman discipline, organization, and strategy. His campaigns stretched Roman influence deeper into Europe than ever before, planting the seeds of what would later become Western civilization. His soldiers adored him, not only because he shared their hardships, marching, eating, and fighting alongside them, but also because he rewarded their loyalty generously. To them, Caesar was more than a commander. He was a father figure, a protector, and a source of endless pride. One of Caesar's most remarkable qualities was his ability to forgive. Unlike many leaders who ruled through fear, Caesar often spared his defeated enemies. Even those who had fought against him were welcomed back, given positions, or allowed to live in peace. This mercy won him admiration, but it also planted suspicion. Some saw it as weakness, others as arrogance. Still, it showed that Caesar valued unity over revenge, a rare trait in a world ruled by endless feuds. Yet, perhaps the greatest achievement of all was his transformation of Rome's identity. He had shifted the Republic into something new. Though he never claimed the title of king, his power was greater than any king's. He was the bridge between the old republic and the empire that would follow. Under Caesar, Rome was no longer just a city with colonies, it was the heart of a vast and unified world. But even at the height of his glory, a question remained, one that whispered through the marble halls of the Senate and in the minds of his closest allies: had Caesar's victories saved Rome, or had they doomed the Republic? Was he the hero who brought justice and order, or the tyrant who destroyed freedom? For Caesar himself, the answer did not matter. He had achieved what no Roman before him had ever achieved. He had crossed every barrier, conquered every foe, and left his mark upon history. Yet the shadow of betrayal grew darker with each passing day, preparing to strike at the man who seemed invincible. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, Julius Caesar entered the Senate, unaware that it would be his final day. A group of senators, many of them men he had once spared or trusted, surrounded him. They struck with their daggers, and Caesar fell beneath the blows. According to legend, when he saw Brutus, his friend, among them, he whispered words of disbelief and sorrow. His death was brutal, but it was not only the end of a man. It was the end of the Roman Republic as it had been known for centuries. Yet, paradoxically, Caesar's death did not stop his influence. In fact, it made it stronger. The Republic could not return to what it was. Too much had changed. Caesar's reforms, his vision, and his example lived on. Within a generation, Rome would become an empire under Augustus, Caesar's adopted heir. The Senate lost its power, but Rome itself became greater, reaching heights of culture, architecture, and governance that would shape the Western world for centuries. Caesar's legacy is one of complexity. He was a conqueror, yet also a reformer. He was ambitious to the point of danger, yet merciful when he could have been cruel. He was loved deeply by the people, yet hated by those who feared his power. History still debates. Was Caesar a hero who brought Rome into a new age, or a tyrant who destroyed liberty? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. What we cannot deny is his resilience. From the young man hunted by Sulla, to the soldier fighting pirates, to the general who crossed the Rubicon, Caesar showed a spirit that never bent to fear. He turned every challenge into an opportunity, every setback into preparation for something greater. His story is not only about Rome, it is about the human drive to rise above obstacles, to pursue vision even when the cost is high. And for us today, this story carries a powerful lesson. Each of us faces our own Rubicon, moments when we must decide whether to retreat into safety or move forward with courage, even when the risks are great. Caesar reminds us that ambition, if guided by vision, can shape not only our own lives but the world around us. But he also reminds us that unchecked ambition carries dangers, and that true greatness is measured not just by victories, but by the legacy we leave behind. So, as we look back on the life of Julius Caesar, we are invited to ask ourselves, what kind of legacy do we wish to leave? Will we live cautiously, or will we, like Caesar, dare to cross our own Rubicon? Dear learners, you have just walked through the extraordinary journey of Julius Caesar, a young man who defied fear, a general who conquered nations, and a leader who forever transformed Rome. His story is one of ambition and brilliance, but also one of sacrifice and betrayal. It shows us both the glory and the price of daring to reach too high. Caesar's life teaches us that resilience can carry us through the darkest trials, that vision can turn weakness into strength, and that courage can shape destiny. Yet it also reminds us that unchecked ambition can lead to danger, and that every choice we make writes the legacy we leave behind. As you reflect on this story, ask yourself, what is your own Rubicon? What step of courage waits before you, a step that could change your life forever? Each of us faces moments when we must choose between safety and greatness. Caesar's story urges us to act, to dream, and to believe in the possibility of transformation. If you found meaning and inspiration in this journey, we invite you to support our work by liking, commenting, sharing, or subscribing. Your encouragement helps us continue creating stories that not only improve your English, but also open windows into the wisdom of history. Share Caesar's story with someone who needs courage today, and carry forward the lesson that resilience, vision, and boldness can move the world. Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep crossing the rivers that stand in your way. Goodbye for now, and may the story of Julius Caesar stay with you, as a reminder of the power within your own journey.